Jay Crawford, Adam the Bull, Garrett Bush, and so many big names, it would take me hours to say all of their names. The ultimate Cleveland sports show. Booyah!
Jason just blasted
I'm
full
deaf.
eardrum.
I can't hear anything.
He thought he was turning up his own earpiece volume. Instead, he just
yeah.
cranked Bulls.
By the way, I would rather, I don't mean to be callous, but so I'm just joking, but I think I'd rather be deaf than have to listen to another Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski press conference.
Torture.
And it's not because I don't like those guys. You know, I'm not trying to get them fired, but they come from the nerd school of talking. They're to the point where even a basic question, which you could answer and not give anything away, they're so scared to give anything away that they just talk in nonsense, really.
You know who we have to blame for all of this is Belichick. I mean, isn't he the grandfather of
not
his
saying
lips
anything.
are moving, but he's not saying anything?
His lips barely move. He gives like 5-word sentences, and that's it.
He has to remind himself before every answer how much he hates the media.
Yeah.
And then he engages.
Man,
but it was tough. They didn't say a damn thing.
They couldn't even give us like tangible like objectives that they wanted to work on. Like they just were like, yeah, we got to put the work in. You're like, that's a prerequisite.
Everything's, and other teams do. Most teams do say a lot of the same stuff anyway. But at least answer like the obvious questions.
To that point in yours, G, to me, it leaves fans asking this question: do they know that there's a problem?
Oh, they know.
They know.
Okay, if they know, what's this very first step to fixing a problem?
Admitting you have one.
Admitting there's a problem. When you have a fan base that's in the millions, I think it's safe to say the Browns fan base is in the millions.
Yeah.
It's not just here in Northeast
And
Ohio,
it's global.
it's worldwide.
Yeah, sure.
What I want to hear as a fan who spends countless hours and money on my fandom, I want to know that the entity in which I believe understands that there is a big problem. And when you watch these glossed over news conferences, my end of the day takeaway was, are they aware that things are broken?
Or do they care?
I actually thought the best answer Andrew gave, and it's hard. He's so soft-spoken. In the room, it's actually hard to hear him because I was sitting like the third row or whatever. But he said, like, we didn't have the right mix defensively, and they had a lot of discipline issues, and they admitted it. Like, he said it. Like, we don't have the right mix of guys.
You can't run from that. I mean, we knew that before they broke camp.
But they acknowledged it. Like, they acknowledged we didn't have the right mix, and we had discipline issues, and we got to fix that.
So that was their sort of big mea culpa.
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, I thought something that was interesting, even though he wouldn't say whether Prefer is going to be back as a
I don't
special
understand
teams coach.
that. I don't.
Because you think he's definitely going to be back. I thought he was definitely going to be back, but then why wouldn't he say it?
It made me wonder this. Has the decision been made?
Well, if you're going to fire him, you're going to fire him when you fire Joe.
Well,
you fire him at the same time.
But see, I don't necessarily agree with that because at the end of the year when these coaches take inventory, perhaps it was obvious to all who were watching the defense has to go in a different direction. I mean, everybody knew that. We were saying in week 6 that he'll never coach here next year. So that to me was obvious. You don't really need to dig deep into the weeds. Perhaps with the other coaches and all of these other decisions that they'll be making personnel-wise, they want to take a little more time, dive deeper into all things special teams, and then make a decision. Because I'm with you. I thought that, well, if he wasn't fired with Woods, he's safe. But then after listening to them talk, I kind of got the impression that, hell, maybe this decision is fluid and they haven't made it yet.
It is possible.
I just don't know what else you would look at. Like, you have 17 weeks of evidence. You have 3 years now of proof. You know if you want him here or not. You know if he's doing a good job or not in your mind. See, when at first when he said, I haven't had a chance to talk to all the coaches yet and everything, I'm not going to get into it, I thought he meant the defensive staff because there's probably some guys that they like and they want to keep, and there's some guys
and he said that. He said there were guys they wanted to keep.
And the new coordinator is going to have final say, you would think, or have a loud voice, I should say, in who stays and who goes.
But he may want to bring in his own guys.
Absolutely.
Sure. And they usually do.
Yeah. And so, like, those conversations they have to work through, and that's a work in progress. But then I think it was Nate Ulrich asked him directly about Prefer, and he didn't answer it. And I thought, well, that's a little. To me, if he's still here, he's going to be here. If he was going to be fired, he would have been fired by now.
I'm glad you brought up Nate. His piece was interesting to me. He made some points that sort of now with the global view we've made throughout the course of this season. But one of the things that he really touched on in his piece was if you look at the superstars on this team, we all know who they are. They're Chubb, Garrett, Watson has to be in that group. I would even put Amari Cooper in that group. He had a great year. And Bitonio. Those 5 guys.
Denzel Ward.
And Denzel Ward,
yeah.
You're right. Those 6 guys are the same guy, personality-wise. They're quiet. They're soft-spoken. Watson himself said, I consider myself a shy person. None of these guys are lead by voice. And that, to me, when I read Nate's kind of conclusion that's what he sees as what's going on, it led me to believe that, well, yeah, this is a perfect example of a team mirroring the personality of its head coach. And I'm wondering if the construction of this team is flawed from jump because who's the alpha?
Well, Jason and I were talking before the show about the fact that, if your leaders are not, or if your best players are not leaders,
and we just named the
that's
6
a problem,
best players,
right?
and none of them are what you would call leaders. Maybe Joel Bitonio might be the closest to that. I don't know.
I think,
but none of them are guys that you would look at and say, "Look at that player lead."
I mean, Bitonio and Ward, I think, are a little more outgoing than those other guys.
Gosh, you do?
A little bit.
I think Bitonio, but not
comparatively.
Ward.
Ward's
a church mouse.
The most vocal guy on that team was probably Jadeveon, and not in a good way.
Yeah.
But he was
No.
the guy with the biggest mouth.
Well, and Perrion Winfrey. Remember when
Winfrey.
Winfrey came in, we thought, okay, that might be an alpha.
Yeah, no.
But your play has to match that level. You can't
Well, and you can't be immature.
Yeah, you can't be doing things that are getting you suspended or, I don't know, guys. I just think that the construction of this team, they lack that clear flag-carrying field general that so many of the great teams have had through the years.
I just don't think, philosophically speaking, I'm a firm believer in this. You cannot play football passively. You could have a couple people on your team that are even killed, maybe even if your quarterback's even killed, because he can't be going, he's not hitting nobody. He needs to think clearly and fast and get the ball and spread and not be up too high or too cold. Baker was one of those guys that was hot, running hot or cold, and that doesn't work either. But I'm a firm believer that your rest of your guys, if you don't have that mentality, you'll happen what happened with the Steelers last week. Mike Tomlin beat them by himself. Just him walking on the sideline telling people, no, we're going to get them.
Dan Campbell, we talked about Dan Campbell's comment before the Sunday night game. Melissa Stark said, what's your motivation? You can't make the playoffs. He goes, I don't want them to go.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
But I would not categorize Nick Chubb and Myles Garrett as passive players. They are ferocious. Just because they don't say a lot. Yeah, just because they don't say a lot off the field doesn't mean, and Myles actually likes having his voice heard. He likes having his name in headlines and being out there. He may not be a rah-rah in your face screamer, but just because these guys don't say a lot vocally and loud doesn't mean they're not nasty on the field.
Do you think, Jay, and all you guys, do you think that every team needs a Ray Lewis?
If you want to be good.
I think you do.
I think
you do. The Browns don't have that kind of player.
And I'd argue on defense, they've never had that player.
I'm trying to think of like
Lyle Alzado, that goes way back into the 70s. Lyle Alzado would fit that bill. But you know what? You're right, G. I can't really think.
I actually think DeQuell played with that kind of attitude back in the day, but the team was so bad around him that it just didn't matter.
And he played in a passive scheme.
It was like him and Joe Hayden, and that was all they had on defense.
If you think about the teams,
but no, they don't have Ray Lewis.
This is what we're going up against, right? For the majority of my life, I've seen my good Boy Scout Cleveland Browns play the Baltimore Ravens with Haloti Ngata, nasty. Ray Lewis, disgustingly nasty.
Steelers, too.
Ed Reed,
Steelers
Troy Polamalu, James Harrison, Joey Porter, Antonio Brown. These dudes are...
And now T.J. Watt.
These dudes
Hayward.
Bring it.
And Minkah Fitzpatrick.
And those are the teams in our division that have had the most success, sustained and long-term. It's the Ravens and the Steelers, and they have those nasty.
Now that could backfire too. The Bengals had some guys that were crazy like that.
Perfect.
And it worked against them, right?
Was a guy that could go the wrong way. I thought James Harrison at times could take it the wrong way.
He went too far sometimes. Yeah.
But I think G. Bush's point. I think our overall point here is, if you look at long term, the teams that have sustained success in this division, it is a black and blue division. It's a lot like the old NFC Central. You have to have those guys.
The other three teams in this division have those guys. It might even be some names that the average Browns fan, if you're talking about the Ravens, the Bengals, the Steelers, don't even know necessarily. Like probably a lot of our fans, because they're diehards, know but like it doesn't even have to be the best player on the other team, as long as it's a good player. But you got to have a few guys that are mean and nasty and even borderline dirty. Not dirty, but like close to that line.
Push the line.
That are ass kickers.
And we talked about, well, we haven't talked about this before. We talked about Damar Hamlin a lot. People forget that wasn't caused by him hitting somebody. It was T. Higgins
bringing it to him.
Playing physical as a receiver, right? You look at the way even their skill positions play. And I'd even say Joe Burrow walks around like he's like, I'm not afraid to get Lamar Jackson. Those guys all have a certain moxie, a certain attitude. And for me, the Cleveland Browns, until they want to be on that same playing field, they got to get guys that they can go out there and say, oh, we got a couple of those dudes that's not going to have that.
Do you think that, because we don't know, they don't tell us, do you think that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski realize this?
I think we'll find out.
By who they go get
By who they go get this offseason, by who they target the draft, and by who the defensive coordinator is. Because Brian Flores is exactly what you're talking about.
He's an ass kicker.
Yes.
He's a red ass. And I said, I think before the show, that's a guy who went and burned down your building and said, I'm going to work here anyway while I'm burning it down.
Love that.
It's amazing.
I
do too. He's a renegade. And who's the front runner in your mind?
This is strictly a guess. I have no idea. I think it's Schwartz or Flores most likely. Yeah. Now, the problem that I think they could run into is guys who are in demand. Brian Flores is going to be in demand.
He'll have offers.
He's going to have other offers. Why would you come here if you can have a better opportunity elsewhere? And we had this discussion. I think you could look at it both ways.
Well,
Number
Myles
one,
Garrett's a big hook.
Sure, he's a big hook. Yeah. But if you're going to get blown out anyway, if you're coming here thinking the coach is on the hot seat and you may get fired again in 6 months, why would you leave where you're at? Why would you leave a situation like Pittsburgh where a year from now he could be the DC
You know what,
Pittsburgh?
though? Yeah, I thought about that yesterday because we discussed that. I'll tell you why. Because maybe he's the next head coach.
Possibly. But and now that's another, because again, like, this is serious what he's alleging the NFL and what he's taking them to court for.
Very serious.
I think he could be a coordinator. I don't know if he'll ever be a head coach.
Yeah. Listen, the one of all the terrible things about having Jimmy Haslam as owner, the one thing you can't complain about, maybe the only thing, is that he is not unwilling to spend money.
And if
I'm him, and they decide Flores is the guy, and I think Flores is the best choice personally, I'm going to Brian Flores and say, the league screwed you over. We're going to pay you. How much do you want to be DC of the Browns?
Hey, you want to draft? Who you want to draft? Oh, by the way, we just gave Joe Woods all the ability to pick his guys. What do you want? We gonna open the pantry up. We're gonna pay you what you want, and guess what? We'll guarantee that you will get an opportunity to be a head coach.
I said throw the title of associate head coach out there too.
And plus, some of us have complained about it, but you could say, Brian Flores, you're the head coach of the defense. It's that simple. Kevin Stefanski's going to let you do your thing.
Well, Stefanski, at least for the optics of it, he doesn't seem to be very involved with the defense anyhow.
And he kind of said that in the press conference too. Hey, look, I got guys to do that. Like, I trust my guys.
I actually like that. I know I'm in the minority opinion. I like guys that are willing to hire guys and let them do their thing.
Let them do their job.
And that's fine.
Well, okay,
it doesn't mean you shouldn't oversee, but
if that's true, let the offensive coordinator do his job.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah, ooh.
I like your thinking on that.
But I do think in the end, if Kevin Stefanski is not calling the plays, then I don't know what the point of him as being a head coach.
Aditi Kinkhabwala is with us. Aditi, kind of the chord that we struck here is that there's if you look at the 6 best players, or at least the named players on the Browns team, Chubb and Garrett and Watson and Bitonio and Denzel Ward and Amari Cooper. They're all kind of the same personality type. They're not boisterous. They're not, huge yellers and screamers. They're all kind of that same guy. And Stefanski, the same thing. Not that he doesn't have his moments, but you never see this fire and brimstone that we talked about this division is notorious for. The Steelers and the Ravens, who have had the most success, have always had those guys, those energetic Ray Lewis, James Harrison type guys. Do you think that this is a construction problem, a roster construction problem, that one of your best players isn't that guy and they sort of do have that void on the field?
I think that you hit the nail on the head, and it's not always fire and brimstone, okay? You don't always have to be screaming. You don't always have to be F-bombing people, but it is that personality, not just the play, but the personality that demands everybody raise their level and everybody play at a better, more focused level. It's exactly the conversation we all had exactly a week ago about TJ Watt. And I told you, TJ's not like a particularly loud, boisterous, outgoing guy. You're in that Steelers locker room Monday through Friday. He's not the one that's cutting it up and playing the music and doing all of that. But on Sunday, on that field, the way that he rallies people, the way that he talks to his teammates, the way that he demands excellence, it's very different than anybody I know on the Browns. It just is. And this is something that we've talked about with Myles Garrett forever. It's not a knock on Myles Garrett. It's who Myles is. Myles can't pretend to be somebody else. You have to be your authentic self. It's just not who he is. So I do think that there is a piece of that you do need someone like that. And look, Joel Bitonio and I had this conversation, and I know I shared it with you before that Christmas Eve game, that Kevin Stefanski, who's one of his most magical traits is that he is level, that he is even, that he doesn't freak the heck out. And this is what we say about all great coaches. When Doug Peterson's Jaguars team was at 2-6, he got that team to where it is in the playoffs and won the division is by being level, by not freaking out, by not panicking. Mike Tomlin, that team was 2-6. He also said, we are going to continue to work. We're not going to rip everything up. Being level is a good thing. But Joel did tell me before that Christmas Eve game that this year, Kevin is showing a little bit more fire, a little bit more personality. I mean, if you guys remember, I think Adam remembers this, a couple of years ago, I remember asking Kevin, like, do you yell at your kids? Do you ever get upset? Because his personality seems so flatline. And Kevin kind of laughed and said, well, I'll leave that for them to answer. And, people were telling me, oh, I've seen him shove a chair in his office. And, oh, yeah, he's raised his voice. But no one ever publicly saw that. And so Joel said this year there's been a little bit more of that Kevin has revealed a little bit more of that. And I think that that's part of being a coach, is knowing, okay, this is what my team needs here. This is what my team needs there. It's why Kevin Stefanski moved his office this year. He created a second office downstairs outside the locker room because the way that building was set up, his office was upstairs kind of in a corner. He wanted to make sure that he saw everybody when they walked in the morning. Now they walk by that ancillary office that he has into the locker room. So it's having a better pulse on the team. But again, Kevin can only do so much. His personality is his personality.
Yeah, to your point earlier.
I remember joking with him about when he goes to a basketball game for his kids, is he one of those parents that yells from the stands? Because full disclosure, at my son's flag football game and at my son's soccer game, I'm the parent that yells from the sidelines. I'm the one that my husband says, shut up, stop talking. But Kevin was like, no, that's just not who he is. So to your point, Jay, I agree. I do think that you need someone back there that is, and by back there, I mean someone in the building, someone in the locker room.
Well, defensive coordinator is the guy, right?
Yeah. And before
go ahead.
Yeah, and Jay was saying defensive coordinator, and he's right. And before we get to Brian Flores, first of all, the big news of the day is Aditi is admitting she's an obnoxious parent at sporting events.
No. Hey, this is my professional opinion. Those kids should want my professional opinion. My 7-year-old son has begged me to coach his flag football team.
Good, then do it. I want to see you run on the. I want to.
If the kid doesn't mind, then my husband. Pipe down.
Tell your husband to shut up. You need
and
to
answer his phone.
Answer his phone. We want to see you run on the field, grab the ref by his collar, get him in line. Aditi,
having respect for everybody in the game. That's certainly something that I really feel strongly about. But if you've got a professional educated opinion on the way that you track the quarterback, why would you not share it?
All right. Well, listen, the Steelers have officially again made me look stupid. I have to eat the losses here along with a lot of pizzas. For the Browns, or for the Steelers, finishing over 500 yet again. I will give you one more chance to do a victory lap on my bad prediction grave.
Please do it. Please do it.
But what is there to do? Like, I just don't, to me, it's sort of like, this is also part of this. Like, okay, all hail mediocrity.
Yeah, right.
Great.
All right.
The Steelers, 19 years in a row, have been 500 or better. Okay, well, you know what? In those 19 years, they have exactly 13 playoff wins. Okay, in those 19 years, they have 2 Super Bowl wins. I guarantee you, Mike Tomlin would rather have had a losing year and an extra ring. It's just, to me, it's
that sounds very greedy, though, Aditi.
Very greedy.
That's very greedy. You've 2 Super Bowl rings.
We've had 3 playoff wins, 3 playoff games.
Yeah, can we cash in 20 of our losing seasons?
The Browns have had 1 playoff win in like 30 years.
Okay, but you know what? You play the game to win those trophies.
That's true.
Like, that's why you play. And it's funny because Steelers fans got so angry at me. This week I tweeted something. I mean, they're always angry at me, let's be honest. But anyway, I tweeted something about, I said, the Steelers, for the 19th consecutive year, have finished 500 or better. That ties the Patriots for second all-time in NFL history. And then I said, in those 19 years, the Steelers have won 13 playoff games and won 2 Super Bowls. The Patriots, in their 19 years, won 30 playoff games and 6 Super Bowls.
Ouch.
Okay, I didn't make any commentary. I didn't offer any opinion.
I just
simply added to the facts. Like, here's the facts, and here's an additional fact that may or may not be interesting to somebody. You may find context in it, you may not. Whatever. There's the fact. And everybody starts screaming about my bias and this and that. But to me, the first is a 19-year run, and I don't care. Like, I don't care about what was the AFC East at that time, whatever. You play who's on your schedule, okay? And part of being dominant is that's how good you are, all right? But anyway, to me, it's like, if in 19 years you won 6 Super Bowls, well, damn, that is really impressive. That is speaking to a high level of excellence. In 19 years, if you were never below 500, great. Okay, but what do you have to show for it? Like, what do you really have to show for it?
It shows that you're among the best every year.
In the last 6 years. It's in the last 6 years. The
Steelers
Aditi, have won 0 playoff games.
Aditi, though, in defense of the Steelers and how they may look at this, the bar that you are comparing them to is unprecedented. In 9 and 16 years, does any other franchise have 6? Or 6 and 19? They've got 6 and 19 years. Has any other franchise even won 6 going back to 52 years?
Why should the standard be any lower? The Steelers are a team that won 4 in a decade.
Understandable, but...
You know what? You asked this question. No, not you. I think G. I'm sorry. Was it G? G or Mike asked me the question a week ago about the Browns and their standards, and do Browns fans just have much lower standards?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, was that you,
was
G?
G.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they do.
Okay. Well, let's be honest. You know what? If I was
pathetically low.
student, listen, I was an A student. I was an A student all through elementary school. So when I was an A+ student through elementary school, I'd come home with a 98, and my dad would say, "What happened to the other 2 points?" My brother, who by the way is brilliant and a Wharton grad and made $1 million before he ever should have, all of those things, was not an A student. So he would come home from elementary school with a 91, and my parents would say, "Great job." You have different expectations based on the standards that have been set. The Steelers repeatedly say that they are one of the best franchises in the NFL, which they are. Okay? They are. The way that they run things, the way that they do business, their commitment to their head coaches, their commitment to a lot of things, they hold themselves to a different standard than just about anybody else. You can't hold yourself to that standard and then turn around and be like, "Oh, yay, we didn't have a losing season." No, your standard is to win those trophies. And Mike Tomlin is the one who will tell you that. Mike Tomlin yesterday didn't want to answer a single question didn't want to make a single decision, didn't want to make a single statement on his staff, which, by the way, I thought was really interesting. As a random aside, the Browns immediately made a decision on Kevin Stefanski's staff. The Titans immediately made a decision on Mike Vrabel's staff. And Mike Tomlin was asked about his staff, and he said, we were so singularly focused on winning this game, I couldn't even step back and think about any of those other things. My 100% effort was winning Sunday against the Browns. And part of me was like, is that a knock on the Titans who couldn't win their last game? Is that a knock on the Browns who couldn't win their last game?
Yep.
Like, just be focused on what's in front of you.
Yeah, the task at hand.
And then step back and do the assessment.
I'm good with that. There's plenty of time to figure out your coaching staff. You got to win the task at hand. You know, you mentioned Doug Peterson, and I love this. During their game, which was essentially a playoff game against Tennessee, they talked during the broadcast about how after week 8, when they were 2-6, Doug Peterson went into the locker room and addressed the team and said, guys, mark my words. It doesn't look like it from where you sit now. This season is coming down to our last game against Tennessee, which is just remarkable to me that at 2-6, I know you're trying to keep your guys up, but you don't say that to a group of grown men unless you firmly believe it. And it's almost like he willed that into existence, and they took their last game as seriously as anybody, maybe but Detroit. I marveled at what Detroit did in their last game, but I give a lot of kudos to Doug Peterson for that turnaround and walking into that locker room at the halfway point and say, guys, it's going to come down to the last week of the season.
Okay, I was there that week. I was there when they finally stemmed that, bleeding, and they beat the Raiders. And here's what Doug Peterson did on Wednesday. So I was with the Jaguars actually a ton this season. In fact, I messaged, I'm doing Westwood 1 this weekend. Jason McCourty, the brilliant Jason McCourty, who of course was in your city, is on the call for Westwood 1 for the Jags game. And I actually texted him last night and said, hey, I was on the sideline for the Jags 5 or 6 times this season. I feel really strongly about how well I know that team. Mm-hmm. If you want, let's talk this week. So that week I was there. And on Wednesday, Doug Peterson goes to his team, and he tells the story of Nehemiah from the Bible. And it was Nehemiah who, of course, got everyone to build the wall around Jerusalem. And the way he did is he told every family, this is your part of the wall. Don't worry about this side of the wall. Don't worry about that side of the wall. You build this part of the wall. Every family did their part, and the wall was built around Jerusalem. And it was basically creating an analogy for his players. Stop worrying about anybody else. Do your job, and we will be fine. And he has he walked into a very, very talented young team. He and Trent Baalke upped the talent by going out and getting a receiver like Christian Kirk, a tight end like Evan Ingram. They improved what they had, drafting Tavon Walker. But this was a team that absolutely had PTSD. You walk in that building a year ago and it was like a war zone. And this is why, to me, he's the coach of the year, because not only did he get everybody playing better, but he completely upended a culture. These were players that were constantly afraid. They played tight and nervous. They were walking on eggshells. And now here they are at 2-6. And Josh Allen just told me this, as my son calls him, the other Josh Allen, the pass rushing Josh Allen, said to me a week ago, he said, we were at 2-6 and he didn't attack anybody. He didn't attack any coaches. He didn't attack any players. He just said, let's just keep working. And that is a huge difference from a year ago of what that team had. Marvin Jones told me earlier this year, Doug Peterson taught these guys how to be professional. Here's another great story I never got to tell about Doug Peterson. In the preseason, he actually put together a slideshow of what players should and should not wear on a plane. He said, we are professionals. These are business trips. So before week 1 of the season, he took photos of all the players in their preseason games as they're coming into the stadium on their own planes, and what to wear, what not to wear, what to wear, what not to wear. Marvin Jones, again, one of the great professionals in the league, told me something as simple as that. You needed to teach these guys how to come to work. You needed to teach these guys how serious to take what they're doing, how seriously to take what they're doing. And of course, a team that has never won before needs to learn how to win. Well, Doug knew that they had all those pieces. Doug knew that they could play great. But this is the process. I mean, a guy like Trevor Lawrence, look, who he was when I had him week 17 was completely different than who he was when I had him week 5. He's way more vocal on the sideline. He's way more about rallying his teammates because he has so much more confidence in what he's doing. He's talking to Doug Peterson and Press Taylor so much more about what he wants to do because he's got more confidence in the way that he's playing. I didn't mean to hijack this into a Jaguars conversation, but I'm just trying to say that really good coaching and really confident players are tangible things. If you know what you're looking for, you'll see it. And when you look at the Browns this year, it's not that they don't have the pieces, but there is one little something. Sometimes it's just one little something that needs to turn it on. And I think with the Jaguars, that's what you saw. You know, you bring in a Doug Peterson. Not that I'm saying the Browns is about the head coach, but sometimes it's just something. And the same guys can give you a completely different result.
Aditi,
the same guys can respond
Aditi,
to a situation completely differently.
Sorry to cut you off, but I want to get Jason's question because we got to get to Bernard.
Yeah, we only got about a minute, so you got to be quick on this. But Brian Flores is the guy that I want for the Browns as DC. Is there anything Pittsburgh can do to keep him? Do you think he would take the Cleveland job? And I'm wondering if one of the problems Kevin's going to run into is sort of the hot seat coach next year. Are you going to get the guys that you want on your staff when you sort of enter the season with that label? Just what do you think about Brian as a DC next year? Do you think he'd have any interest in coming here?
I know that the players in Pittsburgh love him, that they respond to him extremely well as a defensive coach. I think he's got a great mind. I believe that he's learned a lot from his experience in Miami about leading and leadership. I think that he would be a great move, and I don't think that Mike Tomlin, even if it's going to another team in the division, in Pittsburgh, you're not calling the defense. Mike Tomlin is calling the defense. I think Terrell Austin would be another tremendous hire. Terrell Austin is the defensive coordinator in name in Pittsburgh, but he's not calling the defense. So I think he would go somewhere where he got to call the defense. I think Brian Flores would go somewhere where he got to call the defense. And I think that Kevin Stefanski is confident enough in who he is. You know, this is like the quarterback who transfers because he doesn't want to compete with somebody else in college. No, just win the job. You know, like Kevin Stefanski should not be sitting here and say, I'm afraid to bring in a strong coach because what if he threatens me? Kevin Stefanski's mindset is, well, I'm going to go win 14 or 15 games next year.
I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Smartest
Ego's not a problem. This stuff is nonsense.
Help me.
I wholeheartedly agree. I meant the other side. Would a coach want to come here if the head coach is on a hot seat and everyone can get blown out of the building in 6 months anyway?
No, because I think the coach should have enough confidence in himself that, well, I'm going to help that team be better.
Right.
Anybody who looks at this roster, looks at who is under contract with this roster, and sees the way the Haslams are not afraid to spend money. And one more thing that I'll say, Sean Payton was asked about getting back into coaching. And he said the things that would matter to him the most are not the roster and the quarterback, but it is what ownership has shown recently, what is ownership, and what is the brain trust. I don't know how anybody could talk to Andrew Berry and not think that there is stability and a smart mind and a brain there. So I think a strong coach would say, I could be the missing piece. I'm the one that could help turn these things around. I'm the one that could make this defense great. Look at Wink Martindale. You're bringing Bernard Pollard on. Look at what Wink Martindale did. He left Baltimore feeling like, okay, I've done what I can do here. It's time for me to go someplace else. What has Wink done with that Giants defense?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, great job.
Confident, strong coach has faith in himself and believes that he can be a huge part of the puzzle. He's not thinking that he's going to a place where a head coach is getting fired. Right. He's thinking that he's going to a place where he's going to help make that franchise better.
Yeah, I can be the difference. Aditi,
Thanks,
great
Aditi.
stuff.
We'll see you
great
later.
Stuff. Thank you very much.
All right.
We'll talk
to you
soon. We talk about the other teams in the division. Historically, the Steelers and the Ravens have had this success. One of the alpha dogs on a Ravens team that won a Super Bowl, Bernard Pollard, joins us now on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Bernard, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. I'm going to let G sort of introduce you and really talk about how this appearance came to be and what you're here to talk about.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. You know, we've been contacted by a lot of individuals. You were one of the first ones to retweet. I guess I wouldn't call it a rant. I would just call it more of a passionately describing what I was upset about. And so, Bernard was one of the first people to actually almost co-sign that and talk a little bit about and co-sign what I was saying, because he obviously he's a former player involved in the league so much. And I think what happened was it was so much groundswell because of the fact that these are professional players and they've lived it, they've breathed it, and they this was something that I think a lot of people thought about. I just happened to be one person who said it, and it just caught fire. So, Bernard, thank you so much for coming on to the show, talking about your experience and talking about what you've gone through in terms of that. When I said what I said, are there any NFL players that are saying that behind closed doors, or is that just something that people keep to themselves, where it's just like they understand what it is, but they don't say anything?
I think one of the big things, and man, I appreciate you for expressing yourself and being, I don't want to say vulnerable, but being vocal. I was laughing after the fact, because I was like, man, it looked like you had some balled up homework papers spitting facts. And so it was hilarious, laughing at that. But I think, so many people need to hear those important things. And and if you look at it, after the fact, and nothing against the Buffalo Bills or whatever it may be, but what they did as far as with his contract, if the news is true, what they did with his contract and how they settled and made that thing possible for him to still continue to earn his money, that's big. But once again, I think so many people, fans and the high dollar players on teams, they don't look at players like that without the injury and everything that we've been discussing and seeing the last couple of weeks, but they don't look at these players and think about afterlife. They don't think about that next chapter of life for the athlete.
Bernard, by the way, you may not know, but G played high-level college football. He played at Ohio. He sacked Ben Roethlisberger, this man right here. He sacked Ben Roethlisberger in college.
This is the highlight. He does it. You bring that up more than I do.
Yeah.
I'll take you. You could
That's
be my
a good.
agent.
You sacked Ben Roethlisberger. We all hate Ben Roethlisberger here, and you kicked his ass in college.
Miami got the best of us a lot of times. I would say that. It was pretty good.
Hey, Bernard, back to what G said. There's been a lot of discussion after his monologue took fire, and a lot of people saw it. On one side, there were a lot of folks saying, hey, if the players don't like this, they can look to their own vote when they ratified the CBA. How much of that holds water to you? Because obviously, you're never going to get 100% agreement. There were a lot of players that didn't want to put their name to that, but the fact of the matter is that's the playing field, and they were at the table for the negotiations that set that up. What we want to focus on is how this thing gets fixed, because I think it's clear that there are things that are broken. In your mind, being a former player, and DeQuell Jackson, the former Brown, was on with us last week, and he said one of the things that desperately has to happen is there needs to be a sort of consultation group, an advisory board made up of former players that can sit in the negotiations with the current player reps and tell these guys about some of the pitfalls that they don't know are coming in the afterlife. Do you co-sign DeQuell's sort of suggestion of that? And how do we get this to a place where we're more equitable?
Well, I definitely co-sign that, and I was one of the ones. I was a part of the PA when I played, and they did not like me. They did not like my input. But it's one of those things where I was telling them all the time. First and foremost, the bulk of the team isn't voting yes. And why would we vote yes to this? If you look at a lot of the CBA discussions and things of that nature, they're made up of guys that have big contracts. That's what they're made up of. Yep. Those guys, I'm one of the ones where I've always said the bulk of a football team, if you look at 70 to 80% of a football team, they're made up of those 1, 2, 3-year contracts, $8, $9 million, if that. Why are we not guaranteeing that contract? the contract where you or the when you're looking at the NFLPA and guys that are representing the football clubs, they are big contract guys. Your quarterbacks, $100 million guys, $80-90 million guys, defensive ends, $90 million guys, linebackers, receivers, $80-70 million guys. Those dudes aren't like, if they just go be stupid, then they're going to kind of face some of the stuff that other guys are going to face. But most of these guys aren't going to see the longevity that they've seen. They're not going to see the financial growth in the gain that they've seen in the National Football League. So I do believe and they did not like what I said, how I said it, and I don't care. I truly believe what DeQuell said is very true. We need to have former players because these young guys. I don't want to sit here and come down on them because we've lived that life. We understood it. I want them to have fun. I want them to be professional. I want them to be cognizant on what's going to potentially happen to them after their life of football is done, because that window is small. That window, it closes every single year.
Right.
So they need to understand what they're going to face. So former players do need to be on that. The NFLPA, they don't do a great job representing the players, and it's smoke and mirrors with them, with the bullcrap that they pull in the as far as in the media and everything else. I don't agree with a lot of it. I think it needs to be fixed. It's broken, and it's terribly broken. Wow. And the NFL is running away with everything. And as far as with the representation, as far as from the NFLPA side of it, the guys that are sitting in the office, that stuff, it needs to be done, and it needs to be done right. I think the players are at a disadvantage, and they're taking advantage of the players, and they've been taking advantage of the players for a long time.
Bernard, I'm curious, on an unrelated note. DeQuell Jackson, by the way, in addition to talking about the stuff he also said even though he didn't know you personally, said he respected you a lot because he said you were one of the few guys in the league that hit harder than he did. Is that true? Did you hit harder than he did?
Oh, yeah. I brought that bang. Hey, I tell people all the time, I might not have, you ain't got to give me credit. You ain't got to give me credit. You got to call me champ, number one. And what I look to do when I played football, I just look to make people fear me. That's all. I love playing the game.
Your nickname was Bone Crusher, for crying out loud.
Right. But let me ask you this: when you were at the Ravens, I know you played for 4 different teams, but when you were with the Ravens, like obviously there's been different rivalry mixes in this division, but for the most part, for the last 20 years, the Browns have been awful. The Bengals, until the last 2 years, have been either mediocre or awful. The Steelers and Ravens have been good. Was it, even though division games are all, in this division, kick-ass games, was it totally different playing the Steelers versus playing the Bengals versus playing the Browns?
I'm going to be honest with you. I think they hype up the Steelers, Ravens, and everybody in Baltimore hates. They hate the Steelers. I understand it. For me, the hardest games were the Browns, and I say that I'm telling you right now, the Browns. You look at the Josh Cribbs. You look at the Peyton Hillis. You look at all for me. That was where I was like, yo. All right, my massage therapist got to come. I need to get in the cold tub, hot tub. I know what I'm about to face. This is going to be, with the Steelers. I mean, for me as a player, I mean, their receivers weren't really whatever. I mean, they were good receivers, but they were smaller. So, you flick them, they going flying out of bounds. I had the biggest problem with the Browns as far as matchup wise. Wow. But when you look at what the city and everything else and what's being pushed out there to the media, it's one of those things where Pittsburgh and Ravens, which is a rivalry. But for me, I thought the Browns was that game. For me, when I was in Baltimore, I loved playing that game. If I remember correctly, we played at night in Baltimore one time. We played in Cleveland at night one time. Both of night games. It was a crazy game, a lot of fun. I had more fun playing Cleveland than I had playing Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Bernard, let me ask you 2 questions. I asked DeQuell the same question because there's a lot of people. When I said what I said, there's people that be like, well, is that really accurate? Is that really true? Maybe it can't be that bad. So I just asked the players that sit in front of me, if today you started seeing symptoms of either CTE or started seeing symptoms of something that was really major and you became disabled, how hard would it be for you to submit a disability claim? What would you have to go through in that? And also, too, your insurance. As a former player, when you're done playing, can you tell me about your journey with insurance and how you go about insuring yourself after your playing career?
So the question about the disability, I think I would. I've talked to a lot of former players, guys that I went to college with that played in the league, and one guy I know for sure has been approved of total disability, and he's receiving checks for that, and he's not. He's not right. And he should be receiving the checks. There have been guys that have, wrongfully filed for disability and got it, and some have been denied. But there have been guys who need it and that have been denied. So we always know someone who can find a loophole and everything else and try to get things. But I really do. I think I would if I was at that point. It is hard because I have, like I said, I've had teammates former teammates and guys I played with in college that they've been denied every single time, and they're trying to hire a lawyer, then get another lawyer, and they're being denied. And the NFL is a part of a lot of this. I want people to understand how powerful the NFL is. The NFL is behind so much, and that's why they try to keep a lot away from fans, a lot away from other people who potentially, if you tickle the ears, and if you allow them to be woke in a sense, that's going to turn a lot of people away. The game of football is a game of football. I will play this game again over and over again because this is the decision that I made. I love this game. I love the game. I love this game to this day. I love this game. This game has done things for me and my family. I know what can happen to me. I know what can happen to others, and we all know. So for so many people to say, well, the players knew. Yeah, the players knew, right? But I think when you look at the other side of it, the NFL kept a lot of things back from certain players when it came to medical and when it came to certain things. And that's why lawsuits and things of that nature were filed, because the NFL kept that information back from players and they let them go about it. I'll tell people this right now. For me, if something happened to me, I have insurance, right? But I still go off of some of the NFL insurance. So if something happened to me right now and I just fall out right now as we're talking, you guys wouldn't be able to call an ambulance for me. We literally got to call the NFL number for them to contact and then you got to talk to them, tell them everything that's happening. They got to go discuss it, and then they'd say, okay, yes, we'll pay for the ambulance to get him to go wherever. Now, all of that time, I needed an ambulance, right? So that's the crazy part about it. And there's so many things that I can go in with that. Now, when we talk about the insurance, after the 5 years is done, yes, you are off Cigna. You have got to go find your insurance. We have 4 kids. I have my wife and me. So it's 6 of us, right? So the insurance, we don't know. Most football players don't understand the real world, right? We play football for a living. We don't understand working jobs where we're insured and all this other stuff. And all we got to go learn that. And I don't think enough is done. I don't want to bring the hammer down on the NFL with this, but I think this is workshops that they can provide for players that are in the league, and players that are in the league need to understand. You need to know how to go about doing that. My wife does a great job. She looked at everything and figured out all this different stuff for us to be able to have, as far as dental and as far as all this other stuff, because as we learned, like, everything's not under one umbrella. You got to go figure out all this different stuff, and that stuff piles up. And so, yeah, it's one of those things, like I said, it's broken. It's broken to completely take a player you sweep the rug from under him when he's done, and you say, well, you got a certain amount of time to go do this, and you're completely cut off. And if anything happens, you call us, we'll contact you and set up appointments while you're still just living like hell, right? Like, that's just what it is.
Bernard, I want to go back to what you were talking about earlier about the Players Association. You said you were involved in it, and I don't want to mischaracterize you, but it sounded like you said you didn't agree with the leadership of the union.
Right.
And there's been a lot said and written about DeMaurice Smith and the job he's done as union president. Talk to me about that. What do you think about the job he's done? And it seems like there's been a push to get him out multiple times. How do you guarantee the contracts? Like Jay started to ask you it earlier, I think. How do you get these contracts guaranteed? Because it has to fall on the union. I'm one of those guys that he was talking about. It's up to the union at the bargaining table because the owners aren't just going to do it themselves.
Well, first and foremost, he's been one where he come in, he talked the talk, and some players, a lot of us talked and we saw right through the bull crap. And he's a guy, he's a lawyer. He knows what to say, when to say it, how to say it, and who to say it to. For me as a player, like I said, I just didn't agree with a lot. They knew I didn't agree with it. A lot of players was like, well, Bernard, we just got to go. We got to get a vote. And one of the things I do not like how they do certain things, they give it to you on Thursday and say we need a vote at the end of meetings. And I'm looking like, wait a minute.
Wow.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
You cannot. We're looking at so much that's impacted, right, with us for the next however many years, and then if anything crazy happens, you giving us a day or 2 days, maybe max, to make a decision for not only us but other former players that are involved and other players that are going to come into this league. I don't like that.
That you'll be impacted by for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Bernard, one of the things that we talked about was the calendar, because I think it was DeQuell talked about that too. He said that oftentimes when these proposals are made and these agreements are going on, they're so busy with training camp and everything else. Yeah. Why don't we just start by flipping the calendar?
Because the league wants to put the players in
I
that
know
situation.
they do. But one of the
things
things that I think the NFLPA should insist upon is the termination date of the next agreement should be February, not August. This way, you don't have to worry about a strike either in the middle of the season. Then you've got 6 or 7 months when the players aren't busy working on getting ready for a season or the next game. They can spend the proper amount of time, and they can talk to an advisory board made up of former players that can tell them what you just said. Guys, 5 years from now, life's going to smack you square in the face. And the one thing I want to focus in on, and this is mind-boggling to me because I've had other players tell me the exact same thing you did. Although the league is made up primarily of the 1 to 2 to 3 year contract guys who make far less than your average superstars are making, they're the majority. Yet somehow their voices are squelched in these negotiations and votes by the haves, by the few that are set for life, no matter how much money. They don't need to worry about $5,000 a month insurance premiums because they're making $100 million over the course of their career. How do we make sure that we have appropriate representation from the majority of the players and make sure that their needs are met, not the needs of the superstars and the powerful player reps who sometimes might put pressure on everybody to vote a certain way?
Well, I think that boils down to the players just coming together and saying we're not going to do this. We need to get DeMaurice Smith out. We need to get somebody in that's going to represent us and truly represent us. That's what it's going to take. But I think when you guys look at this game, you guys see it. But for a player that's been in that locker room and in those locker rooms and understand it, the NFL has done a great job as far as putting players, and I'm gonna say this in a sense, at odds, right? You don't really hear big name quarterbacks stepping up and speaking up for the players. Why?
Never.
They're set. $150, $200 million contracts, $500 million contract. What are those guys going to talk for? You know what I mean? Like, what are they going to speak out for? Because they're set. Now, when you look at go to the next level. So for your receivers, top paid DBs, top paid running backs, or linemen, those guys really, they still a part of the clique, but at the same time, they're looking like I'm set. While you got the majority that's looking like, wait, y'all, I'm being looked over. What about me? Because those guys are sticking together because they don't know what's tomorrow for me. What is tomorrow? I can be gone. I mean nothing to them. It's a revolving door for guys like us. So, the league has done a great job as far as separating those players. Just look at it. Look at all of the negotiations. Look at everything that's happened. Look at the lockout in 2010, if I'm not mistaken. Look at all of that. What superstar quarterback stepped up? They were proud of being the face of the NFL. They were proud of being on them commercials. They were proud of all of that. But when it came down to stepping up for so-called their guys, this is a brotherhood. Well, yeah, it's a brotherhood, so let's step up. You got your money. Let's get ours. Okay. The 53rd man on the roster might not make $150 million. Well, let's figure out how we can make his life a little bit better when he step in, because that's going to make the NFL and these clubs be a little bit more respectful to them, right? I'm just not going to cut him because his contract is guaranteed. Now, if we do cut him, hey, now it's time for him to double dip. That's a decision that we made. You're doing it with these coaches. You're doing it with coaches.
That's true.
Why not do it with players?
Yeah.
And some players are still making far less than coaches. So that goes back to us talking about the guaranteed money. Like, we need to make these contracts guaranteed. Get somebody in that's going to fight for that. Bring former players in and surround them around guys like DeMaurice Smith. If we can't get him out, which we can if we wanted to, we can get him out. If you talking about taking a stand, nothing against this, because Lord knows we don't want to see situations like this. But everybody wearing 3, everybody rallying around 3, everybody praying for 3, everybody circling in the middle for 3. We got the whole world praying that ain't prayed before. We doing all of this. Why can't we step up and do this for these contracts for the product that's on the field?
That's right.
Why can't we do that?
Football players.
It's crazy.
Football's the biggest sport, and yet basketball players and baseball players do much better.
And from a physical standpoint, no athlete puts their body at risk more than an NFL player.
Yeah, I mean, an average baseball player and an average basketball, I'm not talking about the stars. The average baseball player, the average basketball player is making way much more money than the average football player. It's crazy, but I think, Bernard, you nailed it. Like, the star young quarterbacks, Mahomes and Burrow and Herbert and Allen, they could change the whole thing. Mm-hmm. If those young quarterbacks, Lamar, all these guys, if they stood together and said, not only are we getting guaranteed contracts, because I understand why the 53rd man doesn't want to walk out on the picket line, because if the 53rd man is on the picket line, he's never getting any money because he's out of a job. It's up to the stars, especially the quarterbacks, to say, hey, 53rd man, I got you covered. I'm going to help you if you get cut and never play in this game. But the players are probably going to have to go on strike, I would say, for an entire year and not break the picket line for this to happen. That's what I think, Bernard.
Are they strong enough to do that, Bernard?
The quarterbacks have to lead the way, but they won't.
I do. I agree. Quarterbacks got to lead the way, but I think, for so many young football players, and I said this a few weeks back, and I'm starting to kind of pick up watching football again, and I love the game, but they've messed the game up so much. But owners, they see how players live, right? Management see how players live. They know, okay, they're not going to speak up and do whatever. Why? Because some of these players are living check to check. So if they live in check to check, we know they're not going to step up and say anything.
That's what they always rely on.
That's right.
That's exactly what they rely on. Yeah. So it sucks, and it's hard, because as a vested guy or a guy that's retired, they lock you out so fast, and you have no voice, and they don't want guys like that around the PA or around these young boys, because at the end of the day, they're looking like they're going to tell them things that we don't want them to know. And that's the biggest thing. And so that's what I see.
Well, why don't, Bernard, why don't you reach out to DeMaurice Smith? Get together with guys like DeQuell Jackson. Get a group of guys, name players like yourself and DeQuell. And you guys organize a board, and you go to DeMaurice Smith and you say, if you have the best interest in mind of all members, not just the superstars, then why don't you take it upon yourself to create a board made up of former players so we can tell them that these guys need to know what they don't know. And they can learn that from guys that have learned it and lived it. So maybe you guys, the former players, get together and organize a wing, and you come to Smith and say, we want a seat at the table to make sure the guys playing the game now don't have to live certain ways like we do.
That's good, and I that hasn't been done, and I can tell you guys one of the big things, and I'm not DeQuell, like we really don't. I've never passed him. I played against him, and I respect him. He was a freaking tremendous player, a great pro, but I think the problem comes in is players when they're done, they move on. And, some guys don't talk to each other. I can tell you right now, 4 teams I've played on, in the 9-10 years that I've played, I talk to maybe 2 to 3 guys, right?
Wow.
And that's just, you hate to see that. And it's not like we got bad blood. It's just about life happens.
Life moves
and
on.
So right. And so we've got to do a better job staying connected. And like you said, getting together. And we got to do something. Because,
Bernard, we're going to give you DeQuell's digits. I'm sure DeQuell would love to talk to you. Off the air, McNuggets will give you DeQuell's number. And you guys, maybe that's where the spark starts. You guys come together and you start some sort of movement to get a board of former players to help these guys through the next negotiation. Because I believe that this is the catalyst for change. DeMar Hamlin's injury will be the impetus for the league finally being held responsible, and the only people that can do that are the players and the association. I think this is what's going to foster change moving forward, and we'll get you to 12 digits. And Bull has one more question.
I can set that up for sure, Bernard. I'll send you his number and email after. Bull, you got the last question.
Bernard, before we let you go, this is the most important question of the day. Will you be sad when the Bengals boat race the Ravens this weekend?
Look, hey, everybody in Baltimore are mad at me anyways.
Yeah.
I'm one of them ones where, like I tell people all the time, the Ravens aren't going to win with Lamar. They're not going to win with this scheme that they're trying to.
I like that take. Okay.
That's just what it is.
Bernard's
that's
kind of a hot
what it
take
is.
artist.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't mean, like, I just say what most people won't. And I'm realist. It's Baltimore's got to do a better job. Lamar is a phenomenal athlete, but he's got to learn more at the quarterback position. Right now, he thinks, and they have put him in a position where he thinks he's Superman, and he's doing it all by himself. Yeah, and
that's not how you win in the NFL. Yeah, that's not how you do it.
Exactly. Thanks, Bernard. Awesome.
Bernard, you were
we
awesome, man. Awesome. And I'm sure we're going to reach out to you in the future to have you back on.
Whenever you want to come back on, Bernard, we'll set that up. Thanks again, man.
All right, really appreciate you guys. Y'all take it easy.
And down the road, I think we should follow up with DeQuell, too, on what happens when they get together.
Yeah.
Because I do think that can really lead to change. Jason, am I being overly optimistic and naive?
Yes.
I am? Tell me why.
They're not going to change until the players force change.
The current players have to force the change.
Yeah, but can't the past players?
But will they listen? Will the current players listen?
I don't know. That's a great question.
The past players get marginalized more and more and more. Where do they go in negotiations? What's the first thing they cut? The retirees.
Yeah.
It happens in every union.
Yeah.
Like
because the current
guys,
players don't care.
That was awesome.
Yeah,
I
he
love
was
listening to
terrific.
Bernard. I don't think the current players are going to give one damn what the former players say because they're only worried about their money right now.
By the way,
I agree.
Because by the way, the league that they're playing in now was built on their backs.
100%. But I just don't get the impression from current guys.
The young kids just can't. They don't care.
Until it's too late. They don't care.
Then they have no one to blame but themselves.
Yeah, you don't see yourself until you get older.
Yeah.
It's just what it
Yeah,
is.
that's true, Gene.
But
That
it's
is
to
very,
the point.
very true.
But real quick, it's to the point that he said about living check to check. We talked about this when I was in
So many
before.
guys do.
The NBA Players Association, when they were trying to make real change and they were trying to move the BRI and everything, they were telling guys, start saving money now.
And they didn't.
Don't buy the third car. Don't buy the third house. Like, save your money now. That's the only way that you really affect change. I'm not optimistic that they will.
He was strong on DeMaurice Smith, too.
A lot of them feel that way.
I know they do.
A lot of them
Which
feel
is
that way.
stunning to me. When I talk to players individually, I always ask myself, where the hell's the support for this guy?
I know. How is he still
almost
have the job
never
if nobody likes him?
players that come to me and say he's doing a great job.
No.
Gene Upshaw before him the same way. Yet somehow
it's weird.
I know it's really weird.
How does he keep his job if nobody likes him? Go ahead, Mike.
I don't know.
We're going to bring
It's
Mary
troubling.
Kay on in a sec to talk some Browns. And as always, when we do Browns Talk, it's sponsored by Cuyahoga Community College. Tri-C supports their students financially, professionally, and personally, opening up doors of endless possibilities. Tri-C is where the future starts, and it starts right now. Classes begin January 17th, 2023.
What county are they located in?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
It's funny. I just asked Anthony how to say it.
Yeah, but
I
now
asked
you
Steve
forgot
how to say
it.
And they both said something different, so
Right.
it really threw me off. But it's Cuyahoga.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll give you credit
And
for
Anthony
that.
says Cuyahoga, and he's wrong now. It's
He's
Cuyahoga.
a weirdo.
Yeah.
Don't listen
Jason,
to
you
him.
went there. What's the professional?
No, I went to Lorain County Community College.
Lorain, okay.
But I'm with you. I say Cuyahoga.
Yeah.
Cuyahoga
He
You're
County.
with him.
Cuyahoga.
He says it different.
But I'm a
every day.
Lorain County dude, so I don't live in.
And there's
we
no
have Mary
debate on how
Kay?
to say
We
Lorraine.
have Mary Kay. Yes, Mary Kay. Is it Cuyahoga, Cuyahoga?
She says Hoga, right, Mary Kay?
I say Haga.
Oh,
Haga.
my
I'm a
God.
Haga.
No way.
I thought only people from Parma said Haga. That's what I was told.
This is the show where everyone just beats up on Bull. Aditi wouldn't take the victory lap, but Mary Kay just.
Actually, I think I do say Haga. I don't even know now what I say.
Rethought
Jesus.
yourself.
I'm definitely a Cuyahoga.
Hey, Mary Kay, I thought it was really interesting. You know, Joe Woods gets fired yesterday. I thought that Mike Prefer should get fired as well. Once they had the press conference, I assumed he wasn't getting fired. But Kevin Stefanski was asked twice in the press conference about Mike Prefer, and he didn't say that he definitely has the job. Is Mike Prefer definitely staying, or is there a chance he's going to be fired today or tomorrow?
You know, I really think that Kevin wanted to take care of priority number one, and that was to fire Joe Woods and start lining up some interviews with these defensive coordinator candidates. I don't think he had those conversations yet with everybody else, and I think it was maybe still up in the air a little bit. But I think the fact that Mike Prefer has survived to this point is probably a good sign for him. So, you know, I would have to say that I think right now Kevin's probably leaning towards keeping him. But I think those two guys need to put their heads together and have a conversation.
All right, so it's not a done deal.
What was your big takeaway from yesterday? I mean, if you had a takeaway, because we had talked earlier at the start of the show how all these guys in the vein of Belichick are sort of mastered the art of moving their lips but not really saying a whole lot. What was your sort of takeaway moment, or, you know, if they had an overlying statement, what was it that stood out to you?
Well, if we're talking about from, Andrew and Kevin, my takeaway there was that they do understand that they have to get the right mix of guys in there on their defense. And I think that means schematically, from a talent standpoint, from a, veteran versus young guy standpoint, and from, a leadership standpoint. So I think that they really need to craft that defense in such a way that they've got some great leaders. I don't know that they have any great leaders yet on the defense. I know Miles has taken over a much more vocal role, but they need more guys like that. Some of the young guys are going to have to step up into those roles. I've covered NFL locker rooms before where you've got 3 or 4 sort of enforcer guys on the defense, like the old school Sheldon Richardson kind of guys, or back in the day, the Carl Banks and Pepper Johnson kind of guys, where they sort of, help run the program and they, keep everybody in check. I remember when Myles Garrett had the helmet incident and Baker Mayfield, kind of went off on him on national television right after that. Sheldon Richardson stepped in as an old school guy, and he really salvaged that situation. He put those two guys back together as best he could, Myles and Baker. He and Olivier Vernon took Baker aside and said, that's not how we roll here. So I think they need some of those kind of guys. I think they need to be careful of adding guys to the team that do have behavioral problems. Strong personalities are fine, but you have to be very judicious in adding guys onto the team that aren't going to buy into the program or that are going to be speaking out about things. Because even when you look back at Jadeveon Clowney, you need that guy to be, carrying the banner for your program and what you're doing. And that just did not happen. So I think getting the right mix, as Andrew mentioned yesterday, was my biggest takeaway.
Mary Kay, I said earlier, Jadeveon was probably the most vocal and not necessarily in a good way. Is that fair or wrong?
No, I think that's right. I think that's right, because when you have a big booming personality like that, but the stuff that's being boomed out isn't all about, how we are going to abide by what Kevin's doing. We are going to abide by what Joe Woods wants. That just can't be the voice in the locker room, or one of the main voices in the locker room. I mean, when you've got your Pro Bowl guys are the guys that everybody looks up to. So you've got Miles, you've got Jadeveon, you've got Denzel Ward. Those guys have got to be rock solid. And if you don't have that, then you've got to go out and get it. You've got to go find those guys that are going to make sure that there's complete buy-in with the program. And we started to hear that with Miles towards the end of the season, where he was going to bat for Joe Woods. Now, did he really feel that way about Joe Woods? Maybe he was just trying to hold it together during the season, and that was what was necessary for the moment. They need more of that.
Mary Kay, Adam the Bull said something yesterday, and I totally agree with him. They got one more year here to figure out what they're going to do and to make the playoffs and get this thing off the ground. Or I think they're just not going to be here after next year. Bull said he believes they have to go all in, and what he means all in is they have to turn every tire over to get more players or the right players in here. And I don't know if they have the picks to do it. I don't know if they got the cap space to do it. But I don't think they can be conservative like they were last year and count on young players to come in and just be grade A players off the bat. Because to me, I look at it, they got about 6 games. If they don't hit the ground running and Deshaun Watson doesn't look like he's back to Deshaun Watson of old, I think this is going to be a very tough way for Kevin Stefanski to turn it around.
Well, I do think that, that they really hoped that a lot of those young guys were going to step up in their second seasons. The JOKs, the Grant Delpits, really his second full season on the field. The Greg Newsomes, the Jordan Elliott's, the Jacob Phillips. They really expected that those guys were going to pop this year. And none of them really did. In fact, Some of them regressed. And some of the reasons why they did were because some of them didn't feel that they were being used the way that it maximized their talents and abilities. We've heard Greg Newsome say, I had to move over into that nickel cornerback role, and it was, his adjustment period, and it was mentally tough and physically tough to be able to do that. Now, is he going to be much better at that in his second season, or does he really want to go back to, working on the outside and seeing if he can't build on what he did as a rookie? Even Jadeveon Clowney to a certain extent, if you find out that early on in the season that he's upset about getting put on the tougher link on the offensive line, I think he needs to be heard about that. It doesn't mean that you have to do anything about it right away or that you have to appease him. But I think these guys need to feel like they can go in and say what they need to say. John Johnson 3, we saw him play multi-roles with the Rams, and he didn't do that as much here. And I think he's another player that, maybe, there's more to him than he's been able to show so far. So I think the new defensive coordinator is going to have to try to find a way to bring out the best in these players. Ask them, talk to them, find out what they really want to do. Whether it's, something else in the scheme, whether it's something else they would like to try in another area of the football team, whatever the case may be,
Did
you want your
Jadeveon
player.
do that? Because he spoke out publicly and he was gone.
I think from what I understand, he did try to express himself, probably especially after that Baltimore game. He might have made it clear, and by that time, it might be too late because of the way he went about that. But I think these guys need to be able to say how they feel about how they're being used. You want your players to be happy and to be playing to their strengths. You want them to feel that they can express themselves, and then you want there to be some locker room sort of accountability. There's got to be guys in the locker room that are going to say, hey, this isn't how we roll. This isn't how we do things. And there needs to be more of that.
Mary Kay, did you just get some breaking news that you want to tell us about in that text there?
No, I didn't. But you know that, in this kind of a role, you always have to have, your peripheral vision going.
Absolutely.
So.
You never know, especially this week, right? I mean, this is the week where the Browns, sadly, unfortunately, make a lot of news, and it rarely has anything to do with a playoff game. Is there any fear whatsoever within the organization, based on what you know, that Because let's face it, Deshaun, there's a variety of reasons why it happened, but the bottom line is he didn't play well in the overall for these 6 games. Is there any fear in the organization that he may not get back to being the player he was in Houston?
No, there's no fear about that right now whatsoever. But I think everyone recognizes that that they have to gear everything towards making sure that he has what he needs, that he is supported both schematically and from a personnel standpoint, that he is communicating very, very effectively with Kevin Stefanski. And the thing that Deshaun Watson has got to do right from the outset, and I think they probably started this yesterday, is he's got to speak up. Baker Mayfield never really felt like he was heard, even though Kevin says he's got this open door policy. These guys have to make sure that they are being 100% honest with how they feel about a situation, even if they're worried about the repercussions of what they say. They have to say it. They've got to speak up. So if Deshaun Watson saw, too much of this or not enough of that, or areas of the personnel that need to be bolstered, he's got to talk about that. He's got to talk about it now, and he's got to be completely honest with how he feels. If he's worried about, the play calling or that they don't have enough receivers, whatever the case may be, he really has to be forceful in getting that out.
Yeah, Mary Kay. I've been looking at the all 22. I've already started to go back and look at, the first few games with Deshaun Watson. And one of the things that I see is there's still a lot of plays where it doesn't seem like there's much vertical action. Everything is really condensed. Everything is really close. Everything is under, 7 to 10 yards. It just seems like the playbook has not opened up. And do you agree that if Deshaun Watson doesn't like a play or doesn't like a certain formation, him and Kevin Stefanski, I don't care if they have to get bunk beds because they are tied at the hip. If this does not work with Deshaun Watson, Stefanski won't make it out. Do you believe that this offseason they will make major changes to the playbook, and when you come back to training camp, you'll see a lot different wrinkles and a new identity for the Cleveland Browns?
I think so. And Deshaun Watson even talked about that yesterday. My headline was that he thinks the offense will be totally different. Now, he might not mean necessarily schematically. He might mostly mean that he's going to be a lot better in this scheme once he knows it and once he understands it. And once he understands the nuances of his receivers and, where they like the ball placed on their body on a fade route or whatever. And that Kevin Stefanski will know better how to call plays for him or how much they should use up tempo or, go to the no huddle, whatever the case may be. So I really think that Deshaun is going to take more ownership of this offense. And, I do think that you'll probably see a different philosophy, a little bit of a shift. And if they all put their heads together and they decide that maybe there's somebody else that should be calling the plays, Kevin would be open to that. I'm not saying that's going to happen because I think that Kevin wants to call the plays once he finally has a full offseason with Deshaun and a full training camp and really have a season with him to be able to do that. But he's all about the team, just like everybody else is, and or everybody else should be. And he, he'll do whatever it takes. So if they all put their heads together and decide that perhaps someone else should be calling the plays next season, then they'll come to that conclusion and he would do that. I don't see it happening right now, but it's something that he will at least consider.
Mary Kay, 3 players. I'm curious to know if you think they're going to be back next year. Kareem Hunt, John Johnson III, and Jedrick Wills.
Jedrick Wills, yes. In fact, I think they probably will pick up his 5th-year option because I don't think the $14 million that it is for a player, for a first-round pick in that category that hasn't made Pro Bowls, I don't think that's exorbitant for him. So I think they will do that. John Johnson III, when you look at his $13.5 million cap hit for next year, you always look to guys like that are in those double-digit millions. You match it up with the production that they've had so far, and you decide if that's the amount of money that you're going to be able to pay them. So I think he would either be a candidate for restructuring, or you have to look at the June 1st consideration of after June 1st, your dead cap money would only be about 3.75 compared to 12 point something now, and your cap savings would be in the $9.7 million range. I wrote about that in my Browns Insider for Sunday. So they're going to look at that number and decide right player, right price. And I'm sure they'll sit down with his agent and try to work something out. But he's somebody to look at. And then Kareem Hunt, as of right now, and I've been writing this all season long, I think he will be permitted to walk. He will go out and he will see what he can get on the open market. And if it makes sense for him to come back at a lower contract with perhaps some incentives in it, then maybe they'll all discuss that. But right now, the first thing that will happen is he will become a free agent and he will be allowed to go test the market.
One more, Ethan Posick.
Yes, they'll bring him back. He absolutely solidified the center position. You don't know what Nick Harris is going to be coming off a major reconstructive knee surgery. So Ethan Posick will be back.
And I was going to ask you about Nick. If Ethan's back, does Nick just slide back into a backup role?
Perhaps, yes. I think that Ethan really earned the job and got the experience and already had a ton of starting experience. So really, what you have there. And when we talk about hitting the ground running with Deshaun, you can't be experimenting with certain positions. If you've got a good thing there, I think you roll with it.
One more before we let you go, Mary Kay, and we certainly appreciate your work throughout this football season. It's been a joy and really insightful having you on. But one of the things that you touched about briefly there is the salary cap position. And I know that there are always moving parts to that, and guys like Johnson and his future will have something to do with where the Browns sit from a space standpoint. But if you had to give this team a letter grade as to how they're positioned with the cap moving into 2023, A being perfectly positioned, F being it's going to be a nightmare, where are they in your view?
Well, I would say probably around a B right now, but they are extremely brilliant capologists and they know how to move that money around. And that is why you saw the base salaries of guys like Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper reduced to minuscule amounts this year so that they could make sure that they could add other guys to the team and do what they needed to do. So I think they'll do the same thing heading into next season. You might see some reduced bases, some upfront money for guys, some things stretched out over a few more years, but they know how to do that. They are some of the best in the business at it. So I would give them a good solid B that can climb up to an A.
Wow, that's great news.
Mary Kay, thanks. We appreciate it.
Yeah, excellent job this year.
Mary Kay, thank you.
I know your off season is non-existent, but as we go through our off season, if we need you, we'll reach out for sure, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks,
Mary Kay. What's interesting?
By the way, real quick,
Jay,
Jay, real quick. Speaking of things that are B's and becoming A's, that's the overtime segment on this show. And if you want to become a member, we were a B. I think we're a B level early.
B minus.
We have now progressed to an A.
Yes.
Yesterday you guys were missing me, so it's hard to be an A without me. But we're progressing nicely to an A. Starters tier, it's fine. It's not bad. You got the custom emojis. But if you really want to go big time, you get all that stuff plus the overtime extra video, extra stuff, extra content that nobody else on the face of this earth is getting. So you want to be a part of it, become a Coaches Tier member today.
And we're doing them every day.
Every day.
Most podcasts, most who do Patreon.
Wait, I have real breaking news. Sorry.
Real breaking news. RBN.
Shortstop Carlos Correa and the Minnesota Twins are finalizing a 6-year, $200 million contract.
I don't believe it until it's done.
I don't either.
Every contract gets shorter and less
money. The deal has a vesting
money.
option that it can max out at $270 million. It's pending a third physical.
Now,
what is going on there?
The only thing I would say is that he was there last year, so maybe it's likely that he'll pass the physical.
Their original offer was 10 for $285, I think.
The Twins?
That is correct.
And it's substantially less per year.
His first deal was what? Was 13
for
$315 with the San Francisco Giants.
And then it was 12 for
$300 with the Mets.
And now it's down to 6 for $200. Poor guy.
Hey, they carving that roast beef off the bone. You had
By the way, I think this is more responsible. This is more in line with what I think he's worth. I thought that Giants deal, I said it the next day.
Yeah, but all those guys got long-term contracts. All those guys got 10, 12-year contracts.
How much did Correa change lives last year?
But did any of these other shortstops that signed big deals change lives?
Well, Lindor definitely did. Yeah. Lindor finally returned to the player that he was in Cleveland.
I mean, but Correa's just as good as Lindor.
I don't think so. I'd take Lindor over Correa.
I would take Lindor over Correa.
Yeah, but
And
that's
Close, but it's close.
And by the
I
way,
don't
this is
know.
a great
Over
deal,
his
and I
twin
think
brother is the real question.
Oh,
What's
don't
that?
start with
Would you
that.
take Lindor
Hey,
over his
I'm starting to believe that.
brother who's
they
actually
paid
playing?
Xander Bogaerts, who I'd take Correa or Lindor over Bogaerts.
I would too.
yeah, I would
You know,
also.
although I take.
But I think this deal is more in line with what he's worth.
Yeah. Are there any opt-outs on his side after the first or
there's
second year?
deal is a vesting option that can max out at 270.
Okay.
But can he get out of it? I'm surprised he's
doesn't
locking
say
in
that.
for 6 years.
Then he probably can't. If it doesn't say that, then there's probably
Yeah.
not an escape.
Can
for
I
him.
get into some reckless speculation real quick?
Sure.
Let me ask y'all baseball dudes.
Yeah.
What injury is causing them to lose this much money? What could if you looked at this and said, all right, what is a possible injury a baseball player can have that is costing him three physicals in his break?
It's the ankle is the issue.
Yeah, the
It's
ankle
not
is
an
the
injury
problem.
that he actually has right now. They're worried about the future.
Yeah, so when you're speculating out 13 years, which was just
Yeah.
irresponsible, stupid, and reckless, when you're doing that, you're looking for any minuscule thing that could derail that deal. Also, Jason, you might know more about this. A lot of these contracts are insured, and it is oftentimes difficult for insurance companies to pass the player to that level because in some of these cases, the insurance company is taking a bigger risk than the team.
Yeah.
And the insurance company may have actually said, we're not safe with this. This is not a good investment.
Pre-existing conditions.
Yeah.
Pre-existing conditions.
I actually have a good friend who's a Mets fan. Was like, I said, you guys are you're like the Yankees now, and he goes, yeah, I'm hoping we don't sign Correa because it's too much.
Yeah, I don't necessarily fear the Twins in the division. I fear the Sox a lot more than the Twins, but that's not good news for Cleveland.
No, it's
if
not.
He's going back to Minnesota.
But he was there last year. I think, they had a lot of issues last year for sure. And I think they needed to address pitching for sure.
One player alone doesn't
no
scare, matter how good. No player should have. The only time
I'm surprised the Twins would spend that money that way.
Hey, good for them.
Well, they
I
were
think
all in on him a
I
month
know,
ago,
but
and they had him
their
last
need
year.
is pitching.
Yeah, but there's a familiarity. I remember reading Ken
I think
Rosenthal.
he's a great player.
Hey, can I call an audible and go right to the Bauer thing because I think that fits seamlessly with the baseball talk
That is the
we're
audible,
doing.
yep.
Okay, because I know
By the
we had
way-
another 10 minutes after Mary Kay, but
To me, I know it's the cost of doing business. Most of these long-term contracts don't pan out for the team. They almost never do, certainly at the end. But if I were a team, the only way I'd ever consider a 13-year contract is if I'm signing a guy who's like 19, 20.
yeah.
Because, and at
Like
that point,
Rodriguez, if you get a young star that you know is already a star,
Right.
you
And
want to
plus
project
you're
out
getting-
10 plus, that's
right,
fine.
plus you have control of him 6 or 7 years, so you're going to pay
but
him. for-
Correa's already like 28, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, Trey Turner just got, and I like Trey Turner more. Turner's even better than Lindor. He's better than all
Yeah.
of them.
I'm starting.
Trey
to
Turner's a top 10 player
starting
in
to
the
come
league.
around to starting to get conservative. You people, the Angels got the two best players in the game,
It doesn't matter. They haven't done nothing.
and guess what?
Well,
They're trash.
And,
Yeah.
and at
How's
one
that
point, they had
possible?
the two best players in the game or close to it, and it was Trout and Pujols.
Yes.
And they have done
Right.
nothing.
How is that
No,
possible?
but Pujols was never a
When he-
superstar there. Maybe his first
Yes,
year.
he was. When he left St. Louis for Anaheim.
No, I know, but he was never good. Outside of maybe 1 year, he sucked with the Angels.
Yeah.
No, I know, but
Yeah.
they
At the
paid
time.
him.
They
as
paid
if-
him, right.
And
It was
that's
a stu-
to G.
But
Bush's
that was
point,
a stupid move.
It was. I never liked.
You see, I understand if you're the Yankees paying Aaron Judge, because even though by the end he won't be worth it, you got such great value for him the last 7 years.
Sure, you
you
stole-
way underpaid him.
But my
paying a guy that had his best ball and cheapness for other teams
But
makes no sense.
my question is, how
Yeah.
do you have the two best players in the league in their prime, and
Yeah.
you're
Because
not even
baseball
a
is-
talk?
Because it's not just about
Yeah.
two players.
It's not. No.
There's a great tweet that says it seems like every night there's something from the Angels. Mike Trout hit 3 home runs. Shohei
Yeah.
Ohtani hit 2 home runs and struck out 13, and the Angels lost 9-7.
Now, in
Individual
fairness,
headlines.
Trout is no longer a top 2 player in the
Clip
league.
it. That's a short.
But he's still top 10. And but that doesn't give the Indians a pass, the Guardians a pass for not spending any money.
No, but the Guardians, what I've loved about how they've operated over the last 20 years, they have been fiscally responsible to what this market dictates they can do.
I don't believe that.
They have.
I
now,
don't believe it.
listen.
Yeah.
I don't mean in total money spent.
Yeah.
But they took a lot of heat for not signing Lindor. Lindor would have been a death knell for them. It would have killed them.
Yeah,
They cannot spend that kind of money on one guy.
Well, I don't. Only because they're unwilling to have a payroll at a certain level.
yeah, but that would take up such a large percentage of what
I
they're
know
willing
that,
to
but we're
spend.
accepting the fact that they can't go past a certain point in
No,
payroll,
I'm
and I
not.
don't believe
I'm
that.
not. When I say fiscally
Yeah.
responsible, I just mean that they've avoided the trap of signing that 10-year, $300 million guy.
They have, but they also
can't do that here.
They also should. Well, I think they could, but it
would kill them, Bull. It would look at Detroit with Miggy.
But that's because it would only if the Guardians were willing to have a $200 million payroll, it wouldn't kill them.
But they can't. This market won't bear that.
Well,
out.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that. I obviously don't know for sure, but I think we've all been conned by the owners to think they can't spend more money.
I think
the Yankees could have a $500 million payroll and wouldn't lose money. I believe that. And until
they're
proven
different
otherwise,
though. The Yankees are
no,
different.
I know that. So, but if I think the Yankees can make $500 million or more and still, I think the Guardians can have at least $150 million payroll, and I don't buy that they're losing money.
For a layman that's watching it, right?
Yeah.
You say Carlos Correa, right? He's a good player. It doesn't sting as much. It's
not like football
yeah,
when your rival team gets a superstar.
Yeah, you're devastated.
Especially at shortstop. If he was a pitcher, I think I'd be a little more concerned. But yeah, even in pitchers, you see him once every 5 days. The reason I say this goes well with Bauer is because this story now, Bauer can be had at a price tag of about $720,000
Well, that's assuming he gets cut, which is likely, but he hasn't been cut yet.
No, the Dodgers are going to release him.
Right, but it's not. Technically, he's been designated for assignment,
and
gives them a week to do a variety of things.
But that's not going to happen.
But it's not going to happen.
You're right. Yes. They've got to wait through. They've got to go through protocol. But no one's going to pick him up because they know that the Dodgers are going to be on the hook for the bulk of his $20 million plus salary. Right. So if you're not up to speed on the Bauer thing, in June of 2021, he was accused by a woman of choking her to the point of unconsciousness twice, and as well as punching her and scratching her, all during consensual sex. Immediately the league.
Well, I don't know that that's what he says.
What?
That it was consensual.
No, it was consensual, and she didn't deny that it was consensual.
And this one, okay. But
yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
There was never any claims of non-consensual sex.
That's true. Yes, you're right.
So, and I want to be very careful with this because it's tricky. There's a lot of moving parts.
But that doesn't mean she consented to everything that happened within that sexual encounter.
However, Bauer,
yeah,
there was an investigation. He was immediately suspended. This was in June of 21.
Right.
Hasn't pitched since. He was immediately suspended. MLB said, we're going to look into this. They launched an investigation. So, too, did the L.A. County District Attorney, looked into this. The judge, after looking at all the facts, denied the woman a restraining order. She had asked initially for a restraining order. The judge said there's no warrant for a restraining order. The judge said he didn't believe that she was in jeopardy because Bauer and his attorneys provided text messages. And again, I'm not going to cast judgment. It's not my thing. It just seems to be it is abnormal, I think. But
there's been more than one person accused.
Well, I'll get to that too in a second. Yeah. There has been, but she never filed. She never took it. She just made a claim to a newspaper.
Yeah,
that was the other woman. Never filed any criminal charges. The woman, after claiming that she was choked out, Bauer and his attorneys came forward and said, "Yeah, that happened, and here's my phone, and here's the text messages between the two of us." He provided multiple text messages between he and the woman. This episode, by the way, occurred during their second consensual sex encounter. The text messages said, and these were quotes, "Give me all the pain and choke me out." Those were words that she used in her text to Bauer. Again, not my thing. I don't understand it. I really don't. But I've been told that this is a thing. And that people do have this as a fetish.
Listen, I don't care what two consenting adults do. I don't judge any two consenting adults.
No, I guess we have to stay out of their bedroom.
I don't. It's none of my business.
But it is. I mean, it's
whatever. There's a lot of extreme things people are into. I think we judge people. We have no business judging people. I don't know. Listen, there's more than one accusation. I've heard things about Bauer in the past.
Well, now wait a minute. Now
he has a bad reputation,
right? And we got the things we've heard in the past.
Yeah,
allegedly.
We can't factor that in. We heard a lot of things about Deshaun Watson.
Into whether I think same thing with Deshaun Watson. When I said I wanted Deshaun,
but the league can't say when they. By the way, as I move the timeline forward, there was another woman who came forward to the Washington Post, and she just made some similar claims. She never filed any charges. Nothing was ever.
But that doesn't mean nothing happened.
The league talked to her in their investigation. Now, in the course of their investigation, the league said 324 games, two full seasons was what he was suspended. Then, much like the Deshaun Watson case, they appointed a neutral arbitrator to look at all the facts of the case. The neutral arbitrator just came out and said we're going to reduce the suspension down to 190 some games.
Yeah.
Basically time served because he did not play the rest of 21. He missed all of 22. So essentially, he is now eligible to play Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
Where it gets tricky is the Guardians, by the way, are not going to sign him.
No.
A lot of bad blood, a
Yes.
lot of bridges burned. But to somebody, there are 29 other teams, 28 if you take the Dodgers out of the mix, that are going to look at this way. You're going to get a Cy Young caliber pitcher who I think most would say is in the top 20 arms in baseball. We haven't seen him in 2 years. It's very unconventional training methods and whatnot, but they're going to get him at a $720,000 price tag. Someone, I believe, is going to sign this.
Someone will. The tricky thing with Bauer versus Watson is Watson, by all accounts, is liked by most of the players in the league.
Very much so.
Trevor Bauer is not liked.
No.
He is not popular.
But again, should this be a popularity contest?
In a vacuum, it's smart to sign Trevor Bauer. I don't think he's a great pitcher. I think you like him more than I do.
I think he's a great pitcher.
But I think he's only had 2 great seasons in the in Major League Baseball, and one was the COVID season. You
have to weigh what impact he'll have on your clubhouse.
Right, and that's a big thing here. But just like I was okay with the Browns signing Watson, I'm not going to kill a team for signing Bauer. The Guardians can't do it because he was not liked here. He burned bridges here, and he's a knucklehead beyond this. But somebody will give him a chance because he's a talented pitcher and he's going to cost no money.
He's 31. He's missed the last 2 years.
Yeah. How good he still is at this point,
We
who
have
knows?
just gone through this with Deshaun.
Yes, it's almost the football and baseball equivalent.
Yeah.
Because 31 for a baseball player is probably 27 for a football player. Their careers last much longer.
Yeah.
The good players can, and
He's got a
many
lot more
times
wear
do
and tear
have.
on his arm than Deshaun has. Deshaun's more in the prime of his career. I'd say
Yeah,
Bauer's
but you have
on
to
the
factor in
back end.
Deshaun's had 2 ACLs as well.
Yeah, I'd say Bauer's on the back end of his prime, although he's never had a major arm injury, probably because of his training techniques.
See, I wonder, though, what is the 2 years of inactivity? How does that help him? I know how I feel in April when I haven't pitched for 6 months.
Yeah.
And I'm 57.
I don't know, but listen, he's good enough that at his price, even if he's average
Who
at this
signs him,
point,
do you think? Who's going to be the team? I think the Mets
it's
will do
tricky
it.
because obviously it's going to be bad PR, just like with Watson.
Bad PR.
You're gonna take a beating for signing him.
And New York is probably media-wise,
pun
that's
intended.
that's the city that can
He's
deliver.
not. There's no way he's
the
going
most
to. Plus, he
harsh-
spurned the Mets in free agency a few years ago.
I think, to what G just said, I think the Angels make a lot of sense because they've struggled to get pitching. He stays in Southern California, which is what he wants.
Yeah.
ESPN is making it sound like no one's going to touch him.
I read that too.
I would be a little surprised.
They said not, unlikely, but not impossible.
Yeah, I'd be surprised
I think it's
if.
probable.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this in the past with Aroldis Chapman, and we've seen it in the past with a
but
lot
again,
of guys.
I think it's not just what happened off the field. The fact that so many players that can't stand him.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever seen a player this unpopular. Forget the fans.
He's very much disliked, and in our group chat, I think you were the one that first broached the topic. Should Cleveland sign him?
Yeah.
Like, listen, that is.
I know they're not
happening.
going to, but like
maybe in a fantasy
His last
baseball.
throw in an Indians uniform was when he threw the ball over the home run fence.
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
think,
Right.
I
After
think,
Tito pulled it.
I think Tito wanted to strangle him when he was here. I think
That's not gonna work.
and I would even
No,
go
Tito
so
wants
far.
nothing to do with him.
I would go so far as to say I think he poisoned the well. Like they haven't been able to sign Bieber to an extension. I think Trevor Bauer might be part of the reason why, because he was here saying I'm going year to year. I'm going year to year. Well, Trevor made his money. He made $7-8 million as a signing bonus as a high draft pick. Mike Clevenger didn't sign here. They weren't able to get him to sign long term.
Clevenger was his one buddy, right?
They were really tight.
Yeah.
Like by the
There were-
time
I'm told that there was a group of guys on the team that may not have been accepted by everybody else, but it included 4 or 5 players.
well, by the end of the time, it was basically down to Bauer and Clev.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, at the end.
Clevenger's had his own issues off
and,
the
and
field.
Kevin Gates. No.
Well, some have blamed Clevenger's mindset and some of his problems as rub off from Bauer. I don't know if you buy into that, but
Well, I just mean they were very close.
They were.
And I think I just wonder if Trevor wasn't the one saying I'm not signing a long-term deal, I'm not giving away that control. I just wonder if Clev would have been more open to it. Now, as it turns out, Cleveland was probably good. They dodged a bullet on it.
They did.
Clev's had more arm injuries.
Yep.
And I didn't like the trade at the time, but they made a good trade.
I never liked his. I thought his delivery was
so
too violent.
Yeah.
And I just, from the very first time I saw him at spring training, I loved his velocity.
Yeah.
And I just said that can't hold up. It was too violent.
Yeah. So Bauer's not going to wind up here. There's no chance.
So
he could be
odds
free.
On Angels. Would you agree that the Mets might be willing to do that?
I don't
no?
think so.
Because they're in New York.
Chapman
made it through that gauntlet.
But again, I think Bauer more disliked than Chapman, and I think Chapman's a lousy guy too. But also Bauer spurned the Mets.
And this might impact whether or not he would end up with the Mets. Am I wrong in thinking that there was some sort of friction between Bauer and Frankie?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
But I wasn't around that team very long.
I thought I have a recollection of there being some kind of discourse between the two.
That sounds familiar to me, but
and
I'm not 100%
I can't remember exactly what it was, and I don't know how public it went.
I think the Mets are unlikely.
Trevor, and listen, players have the right to go back at the media because we get things wrong and we cross the line, and there's a lot of things I see that I don't like. But I don't know if Trevor could hold up in the New York media. I think that
would be a gauntlet there.
I think it would be a really bad mix because he has no problem going back at people, which is fine. That's his right.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially if things are wrong. But I think he would spend so much time warring with the media in New York.
Yeah.
I don't know that
he's got thin skin and rabbit ears, and that's a bad combo for New York. One other thing that jumped out to me about that piece that ESPN wrote that you talked about was the fact that they surmise that Bauer maintains his innocence.
Right.
And so they talked about how, one of the things that's going to turn teams off is he's shown no remorse. And as I'm reading this, I'm like, wow, the parallels between Bauer and Watson are stunning.
Yeah.
Because like Bauer, Watson said, look, I've done nothing wrong. These women knew what was going on. They knew what the deal was. And Bauer not only is saying the same thing, but his text messages that eventually the LA County, in not pursuing charges, said, this looks like consensual. It's weird.
Yeah.
And it's not healthy, but this is a consensual thing between two adults. We've got proof that she asked him to do that.
It comes down to a calculated risk for any owner. Is the talent worth the headache you're going to get? And I don't know.
By the way, the price tag's only $720,000.
And then the money too.
If it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I mean,
somebody's going to sign him. It's ridiculous.
And California is not saying that we're the conservative hotbed of the country, but California is a very liberal place. I mean, it ain't like you here in the Midwest. That's a story all the time. In LA. I mean, are they really checking?
Oh, they hated when he went there. They got
there was a lot of outcry amongst Dodgers fans. What are you doing?
Just for signing him in the first place.
Yeah.
Anaheim, San Diego. Could he go to the Padres?
Padres would be interesting.
Yeah.
Especially since that's where all the problems were.
Yeah.
Well, maybe go to the White Sox with Clevenger.
Sheesh.
I don't know.
So does he play next year? Yes.
I say absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I think he does.
Somebody will bring him in.
Yep.
Well, there you go.
The hubbub, just like with Watson, most of the hubbub goes
now,
away.
like Watson, I think we touched on this yesterday. I think there's some hangover effect mentally with Watson that is affecting his physical. We talked also that Carson Wentz, there's probably something going on there with Carson Wentz.
I think Trevor Bauer has never been,
mentally
for the most
strong.
part, as good as he could have been. Because physical tools, I remember coming out of college, seeing him, and in the minors, I was
a first-round pick.
This guy is phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I think he is very sensitive. He tries to pretend he's all tough, and he is, but he's very sensitive. And he is very thin-skinned, as you said before.
Yeah, so how will that...
He wants to shut people up
because
on the mound.
like a quarterback, it's not like you're a second baseman.
Yeah.
If you're not strong here, you're done. And I wonder what kind of carryover there would be. Because you're right, he does carry himself like, you know what, F everybody. I don't care what anybody says or thinks. Yeah. But we know that's not true.
That's right.
Because he reaches out and responds to people's tweets and everything else.
It's kind of like Baker Mayfield. I feel like if Baker Mayfield had the personality of Colt McCoy, I'm like, would he be better? But then again, I would say, well, if he had a personality like Colt McCoy, he probably would have never got as much as he got out of his
as much
body.
as that helped him get to where he eventually got, it probably had a lot to do with him unraveling, too.
But Trevor Bauer is way more talented than Baker Mayfield in the end.
Oh, we're talking about probably I think he's a top 10 pitcher. I really do.
I mean, not now.
Not
mean,
now. But when we last saw him.
Yeah, I mean, he was for
his
a
command,
2-year stretch. He was a top 10 pitcher.
I mean, it's a mental game.
Yeah.
Pitching got to be the ultimate mental game.
If he doesn't drone out with the finger, I think the Indians have a ring.
Possibly. And he's talked before, like, he's not a genetic freak by any means. Like, he's got, no matter how much he works out, he's got, like, baby fat he can't get rid of.
Right.
He's a guy that I think has maximized. He's gotten everything out of his body.
And he does so very unconventionally. A lot of folks looked at him, and this is why he didn't work.
Arizona.
Was it Arizona that drafted him?
Yes.
Arizona.
Yeah,
Arizona
that's right.
And the catcher hated him. The catcher hated him.
Well, he was arrogant, looked at everybody else like you guys are training the wrong way.
He thinks everybody's a moron.
Well, here's what's funny about that.
Unconventional about, like you say, unconventional. What is he doing?
So
that
he
other
does
people aren't?
He was the first one.
And the long
the
toss.
arm stabilizer, the long toss like a freak. And he was also trying to maximize his arm speed. There's videotape of him trying to throw a ball like 110 miles an hour and all this nonsense. But here's what's interesting about that. And Tom House is a guy who also was looked at as this guy's a nut job.
Yeah.
And then finally, after a while, even though he was unconventional, not just baseball, football guys were going to House for throwing mechanics. And then they were saying, you know what, he's crazy like a fox. And I think Bauer is the same thing. I had guys tell me when Bauer came into the league, his arrogance, his thinking he knew everything was going to give him a 3-year lifespan in Major League Baseball. Some of those same people told me that now baseball has widely accepted some of the weird things he was doing, and a lot of other guys are doing it now and had success with it.
He built the Driveline Academy in Seattle, basically.
Exactly,
That was
he
all
did.
from Trevor and Kyle Boddy, who runs it, worked for the Reds for a
And look
while.
where look what they're looked at now as the gurus.
Yeah, but part of the problem with Bauer is he thinks he's an expert on everything.
Well, maybe. But
And that
what's funny
rubs
is
a
on
lot
the
of people
baseball
the wrong
side,
way.
while the establishment said this guy's nuts and he's never going to stay healthy,
it's worked for him.
It's all turned around, and now everybody's saying this guy really knows what he's doing, and we need to spread that throughout baseball. And guys that are using his techniques are having a great deal of success. All that being said, I wouldn't want him in my clubhouse.
Yeah.
But if I'm a fan of a team that is an arm away, I am going to want my ownership to look hard and long at whether or not that risk is worth the reward.
You got to take the pulse of the clubhouse. And I
think that's important.
You got are there guys here that are going to have a
to
problem
leadership
with him?
of the team? Is this,
Yeah. Like the leaders of the team got to be okay with it.
Yeah, first reaction, Trevor Bauer, go.
Yeah.
And see what guys say.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But he'll have a job. I'll be surprised if he doesn't.
Yeah, I will too. I will definitely be surprised. You want to do final takes now?
We got some internet comments first, then we will get to final takes today. We got a bunch today, actually. This first one's kind of tough to read. It's from Levi Robin. I'm a diehard Steelers fan, and I love this show. I learned more juicy Steelers stats here than on Steelers podcast. Sorry for all your pain. Here's a super chat as a snack. Yins deserve it.
That's the biggest compliment that you
fair.
can give.
You're right.
I'm all right with that.
Yeah.
Behind enemy lines, and he paid money to do it.
Yeah,
You guys
that was.
are great.
You're right. To compliment Browns fans.
This next one's from Rin D. The best game Stefanski ever had was the game he didn't coach. The D had 5 turnovers. The offense scored 48 points to beat the Squealers in the playoffs.
That's why they didn't get rid of Prefer. He got the best play. He got the playoff win. We missed that one.
Didn't Van Pelt coach that, or did Prefer?
Prefer.
No.
That was Prefer.
Prefer?
Yeah.
All right, next one's from Will McEwen. This is going to be, let me read this real quick. If you're a coach like Flores or Schwartz, I'm going to just translate a little bit. If you're a coach like Flores or Schwartz, I would think this is a dream job. Some great talent. You turn it around, make the playoffs. You're a head coach candidate next year. Team starts off bad. You may get a chance in Cleveland anyway.
I agree with all of
that.
I agree with that.
And then last one, Bauer's a complete moron. He'd ruin any locker room. Stay away.
That was concise.
You know what they say, 29 teams can think that way. It just takes one.
Yeah, so there'll be one team that'll give him a shot.
You think he'll ever return to stardom levels?
I don't, but
No.
I think
I don't
he'll
either.
be a
I
solid.
think the mental side will keep
He'll
him.
still be decent.
He'll be
And
above
he'll have
average
his
starting
games.
pitcher. He'll be above average.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know what? A lot of teams have their front of the rotation guys set. these teams that we talk about as contending.
Right.
Man, I almost
What they need is that number three or number four.
starter.
And I think at that price, that for a number 3 or a number 4, you're not going to find anybody that brings that much talent to the table.
Jack, that spawned the question. I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, does Deshaun Watson actually have to be a top 10 quarterback for the Browns to win?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Can he be 12 or
Nope.
13?
No, he has to be the guy.
I think 10 specifically is an irrelevant number. I think there's like 6 or 7. Depends on the year. I think there's anywhere from like 4 to 7 or 8 elite tier quarterbacks. Okay. And he's got to be, even if he's the last guy in that tier, he's got to be in that tier.
You call yourself the Duke of knee jerk. I'll ask Jason
Yeah.
a knee jerk question. Does he ever return to what he used to be?
There you go. That's what I was sitting there with my heart
He's
on.
better or they're screwed.
Yeah, I think he will.
Okay.
I think he will.
Okay.
But I look at this and go,
How much of that is hope?
there's some
Yeah,
hope
well,
there.
The larger part of me thinks he will not.
And part of
The
me thinks
hopeful
like
side of me says he damn well better.
this is the Browns, and if there's a trap door somewhere, they're going to find it. and that's honestly that's my concern.
That's it.
Right? No, that's so
I mean,
true.
out of how many players that have come here, like that have gotten here, how many players for the Browns have had spectacular, shining seasons or greatness? OBJ came here and we was like, yo, we got something, and we got 0. It was crazy. Like the production, it just looks like they're different players, and I think it's the Cleveland factor. I haven't seen it. Now, trust me, I wanted with all my heart, I want it to be that way. But you go back to the players, and by the time they leave here, these players aren't even looked at as the same.
See, that's the thing. I wonder, we talked about this with Bauer and we brought it up with Carson Wentz. I wonder if the mental damage is irreversible. Because to play that position you have to be Joe Burrow. You said this yesterday. The greatest answer to any question I've heard asked this year, how long will your window be open? As long as I'm playing.
Yeah.
I want my quarterback to
Watson's
walk,
gotta feel
talk,
that way.
and act that way. He doesn't walk that way right now.
Not right now.
He doesn't talk that way right now. And my fear is he may never overcome those hurdles
And that's
to
possible.
be what he once was.
And if that happens, the Browns are effed.
Which
And
is
G,
why
the
I was
reason-
so not for that move.
Gee, the reason why he has to be in that upper echelon, I'm just going to list real quick the ages and names of the quarterbacks in the AFC playoffs that he'll have to go against every year. You got Josh Allen, who's 26, not going anywhere for a long time. Patrick Mahomes, the elder statesman, 27, not going anywhere for a long time. Joe Burrow's 26. Lamar Jackson may not be in Baltimore, probably not leaving, 25. You have Justin Herbert's 24, Trevor Lawrence, 23. And then you have the combination of Tua and Skylar Thompson, which don't really fit into that same
Skylar
category.
Thompson.
Yeah, let's
But
just say Tua.
you look at Deshaun Watson, those are the guys he has to go
Yeah.
against.
No,
That's
you're right.
Just in the AFC.
How old is he? 27?
He's older than all those guys.
He's 27.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he's older than Mahomes, but he's the same age as Mahomes.
Yeah. They were drafted the same year.
You know what's wild is watching the championship game last night, Bennett, the quarterback for Georgia, is older than I think 9 starting quarterbacks in the NFL.
He's older than Lamar Jackson.
I didn't
He's
watch
older
a
than
minute.
Jackson. He's older than
watch a minute of that game.
Herbert. I flipped it on. There was obviously curiosity.
Yeah.
I
told
finally
y'all.
turned it off.
It was 10-7.
Well, I said 42-20. You hedged your bet. You were like, it's going to be awful. They're going to kill them.
I
It's
know.
going to be ugly. And I go, well, then let's bet it. And
Yeah.
you go, well, the spread's 14. That's an awful lot.
Oh, you're
I just hate betting spreads that big. My gut
I
was
know.
right. My gut was spot. I did make some money on TCU under 24.5 total team.
Yeah.
There you go. They only scored on a broken coverage, busted play. It was the only reason they scored 7 in
That
the
was
first
it.
place.
Otherwise, it would have been 66-0.
If I parlayed, those odds would have been beautiful.
Poor ESPN.
Chicken
They're
down.
crying right now as they're looking at the overnight ratings from last
Man,
night.
that was
Good.
horrible.
Screw 'em.
I mean, there were a lot of people like you, Bull, that said, I'm not even interested.
Not
I'm not even
interested.
turned on.
10-7.
Jason texted our group chat last night, and I think he said,
I turned it on. It was 17-7. Saw him one more score and said, "Nope,
I've
good.
seen enough.
I'm out.
That's
Yep.
it."
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah, I was like,
Terrible.
I gotta go.
Final takes?
Final takes, Bull, you're up first.
All right, I'm going to do more about the Guardians here. It's been an interesting offseason. For the first time in a number of years, this is more big picture baseball before I specifically get to the Guardians. Now with Correa signed, there's no big free agents left on the market. And this is good for the game because it's early January. For the last bunch of years, you've had some good players signed in February, even March, in some cases, not until the season started. Who's the best player left on the market right now? I don't think there's anybody.
Trevor Bauer.
Well, that's a unique
That's a
circumstance
joke.
that he
That's
just
a
got
joke.
cut. Yes, thank you. But I think that's good. smaller picture, there are some interesting guys out there. Now, I think the Guardians are probably done adding significant pieces, but I'm going to remain hopeful. And there's an A-plus way we can end this offseason for the Guardians, and then a B way, and then an F way, which is do nothing else. Now, I'm not giving them an F for the whole offseason, but I'm saying the rest of the way. Now, the A plan is 2 blockbuster trades by the Guardians, where you're not spending a ton of money, because both of these guys that I'm saying to trade for are under team control for a number of years, and you have the prospects to get both of them. The Guardians have one of the best farm systems in all of Major League Baseball, and they have a lot of young players already in the big leagues. How about 2 trades? Pablo Lopez of the Marlins and Brian Reynolds of the Pirates. 2 teams that are playing for the future. A great young hitter with 3 years of team control, and I believe Lopez has 3 years of team control as a pitcher. You would add Lopez to Bieber and McKenzie. You would add Reynolds to what they already got in the outfield, and both those guys under control the next few years. It would be an A++++ offseason for the Guardians, and they'd be overwhelming favorites to win the AL Central. Okay, maybe they can't go that big. Let's go a little lesser tier. How about you trade for Carlos Carrasco? You bring him back. Wouldn't cost you much to get him, because the Mets, whose payroll is so high, would looking to just get rid of his salary at this point. And then sign Trey Mancini, who is actually probably the best free agent still out there. A good player to put into that first base DH mix with Naylor and Bell. That would still be some good additions. In the end, I'm not confident they're going to do any of those moves, but I'd like to see that happen. What do you think about Lopez and
who are we giving up? I can't grade a trade if I don't know what we're losing.
Well, Pablo Lopez.
I mean, would I like to have those guys? Hell yeah, but at what cost?
It's going to cost you Espino, Gavin Williams,
and I'm not.
A couple
and that's
of those
why
middle infielders.
Yep,
to
that's
get
why
both of those guys, you're losing.
You're losing the pieces that you are building your future on. I'm not ready
Lopez
to do that.
You got under team control for, I said 3, but it might even be more than that. The
Even
guy won a Cy Young.
So
You're not going to trade guys to get a Cy Young pitcher?
No, I'm just saying. I'm not arguing that point.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if you have 3 years of team control, you have them for 2 because
It
they're
might-
going to trade them with a
You're
year
right.
left.
You're right.
Well, it might be more
In
than
Cleveland, you always have to subtract 1.
You're going to trade them
matter
with
what.
at least
more
a
than
year
that, but
left,
go
if
ahead.
not more.
Even if it's 4, it's 3. If it's 3, it's 2.
Yeah, but I don't know that those guys are going to be great. I know Pablo Lopez
And
is
here's
already
what
great.
I can't do, and it's really tough. We've all been asked this a lot. Like, what do you think about going after this player? That's half the equation. You showed me half the puzzle. I
Well, let me
need to
tell you
know
something.
exactly what I'm giving up. It can't be, like in the case of Donovan Mitchell, it's like whatever you got to give up, you give up.
And
These
by the
guys
way,
aren't those guys.
They're not giving up all those guys. We keep thinking the Guardians have to give up everybody. The A's got nothing in that Sean. They didn't get any elite prospects in that Sean Murphy
No,
trade.
I was disappointed that when I saw what they gave up, that we didn't get him.
They had a certain price that guys that they wanted from Cleveland.
Pablo
Cleveland
Lopez
was
didn't
unwilling
win the
to
Cy
budge.
Young. What the hell am I
Yeah, I
talking
know. When you said Lopez is a Cy Young winner, I'm
Sorry.
like, what the hell are you talking about?
What am I confusing myself with? Well, but Pablo, but he's a
Look,
real
the guy on the Marlins,
so it's Rosanna Dana from Saturday Night Live. Never
Sandy
mind.
Alcantara.
Yeah, that's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
not
okay.
Pablo Lopez.
Well, that's a horse of a different
yeah,
color.
my bad.
Yeah.
Brain fart.
Never mind.
Yeah, no prospects then. All right, you had me sold. You falsified his
Anybody
record.
else want to
I
do
had
a
a
final
brain
take?
fart. Wrong Marlins pitcher.
All right, I want to talk about something that this is not sourced in any way. This is just something as I was kind of cranking through some things and looking at some things. The Minnesota Vikings built a new stadium a couple of years ago. It's one of the finest stadiums in the league. It cost over $1 billion, and the state kicked in $500 million. And $350 million of the $500 came from electronic pull tabs. Gambling is not legal in Minnesota, but you can buy these pull tabs through charity. And I'm going somewhere with this, so stick with me. So they buy these electronic pull tabs through these charity organizations. They take a portion of that, and they allocated it to pay for this new stadium. I am of the belief that Brown Stadium will be the next facility replaced in Cleveland because it's an awful location. The sight lines are awful. You can't see the scoreboard from the most expensive seats. It was a rush job. It's a terrible stadium. But let's back up. So when the Guardians were doing their lease negotiations, they never even asked for a new stadium. The city doesn't have the money. The state doesn't have it. They knew that was a non-starter. But now that gambling is legalized in Ohio, I'm wondering if there's a way for the Browns to get a new stadium out of this by doing something similar to what Minnesota did and allocating some of the funds. Ohio's about to get a bit of a windfall here with some of these gambling proceeds. Is there a way to now reallocate that back into facilities to where the state would earmark X number of dollars and put them toward renovations. You know, we haven't heard a whole lot with the Guardians renovations lately about what's going on in Progressive Field. Obviously, the Cavs just redid Rocket Mortgage. And the Browns are up next, and their lease expires, I think, in 2028. And we've heard nothing about a new stadium to this point. And really the trend in these stadiums for a long time was, if you want it, you go build it yourself, Mr. Billionaire. And we saw that in L.A. Cranky built the whole thing himself in Inglewood. We saw that in Minnesota. The Wolf family put up quite a bit of money to get that thing done. And then Buffalo came along and redid all of that. And the deal that Buffalo got from the city and from the state of New York was stunning in the amount of public dollars that are now. It set back stadium building 20 years. And so as we walk through this, as we work through this, as we talk about what's going to happen to First Energy Stadium, as we talk about the possibility of building, and again, I'm the only one saying this so far in terms of building a new stadium. I think it needs replaced, and I just wonder if there's going to be a way to reallocate some of these gambling funds that the state's going to take in to help build a new stadium in Cleveland.
Alcantara, 5 years of team control, by the way. Bad job out of me saying Lopez instead of Alcantara.
Get in line, though. A lot of entities are saying, give me some of that gambling.
See you in overtime.
See you tomorrow, too.